This podcast offers you the opportunity to explore new perspectives through compelling interviews with beautiful human beings and words of wisdom and love. The show was created to guide and inspire you. If you are looking for more meaning in your day-to-day life, if you're looking to be wowed by everyday people, if you're on a journey to joy, peace of mind, freedom, or a wild new adventure, then honey, you're in the right place. Welcome to Turning Inward with Dr. Vivian.
Well, I was thinking about this, the beginning step of turning inward when we had been corresponding about this. And it's funny. Well, just to back up. So I didn't go to law school because I had an inherent love of the law and our justice system and wanting to see, fairness upheld. I wanted to go to grad school and my major was French. And so my grad school options were somewhat limited if I did not want to become a professor of French, which I didn't. Mm-hmm. Medical school was clearly not an option. And so that left business school or law school. And I'd heard that, if you like to read and if you like to write, law school is good. And I thought, that's a very respectable profession. And so I kind of went about it that way, which, for the amount of time and energy and money you put into a career or a schooling as a lawyer and then your career, oh my gosh, that is not a good reason. And, the bottom line, it really came down to I was doing it to impress others or not disappoint others. So when you're then going into billing, a couple thousand hours a year at a firm, unless you really love what you're doing, it is not fun. And so I knew pretty early on that it was not a great fit. But at the time, I was married to a really successful attorney, and so I was able to kind of step back from law, but I knew just overall there was something not right about my life. I was not in the right life. I'd had a little voice in my gut from the time I left undergrad saying you are not moving in the right direction, with regard, quite frankly, in my marriage and as well as my career as an attorney. And so I think that the first time I really took a step back and started to look inward, and this is going to sound really strange, but it was the first time I went to Burning Man. And I think that would have been in 2009. Have you been to Burning Man, Vivi?
I have heard about it. I haven't had the pleasure of being there.
Well, so for those, I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's this crazy festival in the middle of the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. And for 1 week of the year, this is the third largest city in Black Rock in Nevada. It's the third largest city, and it's Black Rock City. And it's just people who come from all over the country and the world to create this leave no trace little city for about 10 days, actually. And when you hit the gates there, you really shed your social skin. And it's the first time I'd ever seen that. I mean, people are shedding a lot more than just their social skin. It was just one of those times where the first time in my life, no one had a title. You didn't know how much money someone had or their education or their social standing, all these things that I'd been raised to believe were what counted. And I had the biggest ball of my life. It was so much fun. And we came back and I thought, this is like, I found my home. It's so funny when you enter Black Rock City for the first time, or really when you return in subsequent years, which I did for many years, they say, welcome home. And I thought, oh dear. And it's around that same time I found an article by Martha Beck in O Magazine. And it really, I would say it found me. I was in a doctor's office. I was trapped with the reading material they had there. I didn't read O Magazine at the time, and I just frustrated picked up O Magazine, and it fell open to this article by Martha Beck. And it was an article that basically was about your essential self and your social self. And I don't know if you've talked about that a lot on your podcast, if I need to explain what those words mean, but I know you know what they mean, Vivi. Mm. But I realized that I had created an entire life around my social self. Every single thing I had done, my marriage, my schooling, my career as an attorney, my choices of organizations to belong to outside of work, things like that. I didn't even know who my essential self was. I got an inkling at Burning Man that first time, but it's kind of like, when you think about that young child that you were before anyone else got a hold of you, that's what I started realizing was still in there. And so, yeah, I realized I had to leave everything. Nothing could remain. I left my marriage, I left law. And over the course of the next year, I took a Pray Love volunteer trip around the world and did some volunteer work in Spain, in Thailand, and in Indonesia, and spent several months around each of those places. And it was just life-changing. And what's so funny was right before I left on that trip, I had the opportunity. Martha put together a last-minute Wayfinders workshop at her ranch, and it coincided with the week before I was to leave to go abroad. So I threw that into my travel itinerary. After spending a weekend at her ranch, I just knew I needed to stay connected with her organization. I didn't really care how that looked. I just needed to be a part of her energy. Mm-hmm. And while I was traveling abroad, I hadn't had much internet access, so I had emails piled up for miles. I had a brief stopover in Bali for 2 days, and I made it my goal to go through emails. Opened my inbox in Bali that first day, and there was an email from Martha Beck that said, life coach training starts the month you get back from being abroad. So without giving it much thought, I clicked yes and signed up. And lo and behold, I kind of enjoyed coaching. So when I got back and did the program, that was in fall of 2013, that kind of started the whole ball rolling toward life coach training. And got certified in, I guess, late 2014 or early. I guess when I finished the process, it was January of 2015. And then, as you know, we all started master coach training this past spring in 2016. So that's how I got here. I hope that wasn't too long of an answer.
It was not too long at all. And yes, we are master peeps. Now, so from 2009 to 2013, the reason I bring that up is because when a person's looking at how is this going to work? How has it worked for others? They're sort of looking for matches. Like we used to play that game, where you turn over the card and you're looking for a match. 2009 to 2013, that did not happen overnight.
No, you're absolutely right. It really didn't. And I was just thinking about that the other day. Let you finish your question before I just launched it.
No, you go with it. Yeah.
It's funny because I was just thinking about the same thing. I'm reading right now. I'm right in the middle of Lissa Rankin's The Anatomy of a Calling. And I don't know, are you familiar with that particular book?
I haven't read that book, but I'm familiar with her work.
Yeah, I love her work. I actually took her class with Martha, Coming Home to Your Spirit. I guess it was in 2014. Anyway, I really fell in love with her work. And one of the reasons I was so attracted to it was because while I was not a doctor, I was, a lawyer, and she kind of went through the same thing as a doctor, although she was in the practice of medicine much longer than I was in law. But she ended up leaving, and I didn't realize until I read this book just how long she was in that liminal place between medicine and finding her true calling, which I believe I haven't finished the book yet, but from what I know about her, it's starting the Whole Health Institute. And I was so curious now that I'm reading the book to see how long she was in that place. My life from 2000, I knew the little voice had been saying something's not right. But see, it's so funny because my life looked so perfect from the outside. I really cannot emphasize enough. Like my ex-husband, I'm so proud of him. He's self-made. We're actually a lot kinder and closer now than we were when we were married. But he was incredibly successful. And so we had the things that culture and you read about in People magazine, that I always wanted as a little girl and really didn't have. He provided for us, and it was just amazing. So it was very hard to walk away from all of that when my entire self-worth was wrapped up in all of those things. So it was an extremely slow progression for me because it took, I'm really not kidding. And I know, everybody has their own version of what creates their self-worth. And I'm working on right now how to develop that for my relationship with spirit or source, not from externals, from who I am as a spiritual being having a human experience. But for my entire life, up until just several years ago, my entire self-worth was wrapped around my education and my ex-husband's money. And so to walk away from all of that, it took a really long time, Vivi, for me to get, well, as Lissa Rankin puts it, and I like this, until the pain of staying exceeds the fear of jumping, you're going to stay put. And it had to get really painful. And there were some other things that came into play, but I started reading a lot more self-help work. I bought every single one of Martha's books in quick progression after I read that article in O Magazine. And there were, of course, happy times between, I guess I left the marriage in fall of 2011, and I left the city of Austin for city of Seattle in summer of 2012. So it was a progression. And I met my current partner around that same time in 2012. And it was just a lot of, I have to say, the universe really conspired to assist me, just kept sending catalysts to get me out of my old life, kept sending me new things to move toward, like the love that I have with my current partner. And so it was several years to get to that place where I was brave enough to leap. And of course, here I am in Seattle now. And so I am not licensed in the state of Washington. So even if I wanted to practice law, I really can't. I'm only still licensed in Texas. So it was one of those things where I had to find something new to do. And I was blessed enough where my divorce settlement gave me a little bit of breathing room for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And it took some time. There was a lot of healing and a lot of hibernation. Seattle has been really good for that. Mm-hmm. But it's just really been in the past year, Vivi, that I have come out of the shell of the divorce and leaving one career for another that was very, very different. And so I think, Vivi, it's going to be another couple of years probably until I really hit my stride. So I consider myself, while I'm on the back end of square one, if the people who listen to your podcast know about our squares in Martha's coaching world, but there are still some times where I am in the thick of it. So,
Yeah, you're growing your roots.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That place in between, for the folks that are listening that are there, that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's slow moving. It doesn't happen fast. It's a transformation, like the caterpillar moving into its chrysalis.
Yeah.
And I get asked a lot, what motivated you to get out of that? And it was the same thing. The suffering just became too much to bear.
Right.
Because when you have a choice, you're not going to move away from social because you want to fit in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I can't emphasize enough. I had left my firm. And so my ex-husband and I had purchased a beautiful home in Los Angeles. And I was able to spend a lot of time with friends and family and do a lot of volunteer work. And I have to say, I think that, however you view, whatever your cosmology is, I really believe like it was just a really divine setup because I had the opportunity and it was a really unique one, to experience everything that I ever thought I wanted when I was younger. And it took having all of that to know that it was not enough. It was not my calling. It was not my best life, even if it looked perfect by culture's standards.
You and I, when you're coaching, you have conversations. And I find that for some people, it's easier to just get to the top of the ladder, look around and go, oh, so this isn't it?
Right.
And you need that level of, I'm getting body chills. You need that level of assurity to say, I can turn my back on it because I see it. I've done it.
Yeah. I think while I'm not practicing law right now, I wouldn't trade the education and the experience for anything. And I really, in my unique circumstances, I don't think I could do what I was doing now had I not had the experience of, like you say, being given the opportunity to, quote, have it all. Mm-hmm. And to know that that it wasn't right for me anyway.
Now, I want to bring you back to when you said impress or not disappoint others.
Yeah.
Because so many of us, again, when you're having conversations, say, but they, and who's they? So when I hear that, then I think about who are the real others that you want to impress? Did that change for you? So it moved from a nebulous void of they and others to some more specifics?
It's a really good question. Martha, talks about your everybody, or I guess in psychology, the generalized other. And so for me, whenever I said, well, everybody will be impressed, everybody will be disappointed, that everybody for me never changed. And it's really, really embarrassing who my everybody was. So I grew up in a very small town in East Texas, and it's the strangest setup in this little town. It's close to Dallas. Actually, you're in Fort Worth, right?
I am.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tyler.
Okay.
So there are a lot of very hierarchical little social climbing structures in that little city. It's the strangest thing. And I was raised kind of in the thick of it. And my everybody happened to be the loudest voice in my everybody was a friend's mother who was incredibly judgmental and very, very much concerned with social status. And I always felt, because my family, we had a thoroughbred farm, and because we lived kind of on the outskirts of town, I always felt kind of like, you just fell off the turnip truck. Even though it was a wonderful farm and I loved my dad's work of training and racing thoroughbreds, I still felt kind of like on the outside. And so this voice was this friend's mother my whole life. And so I remember making the decision to go to law school, and I thought, what will people back home think? Finally, I will have a one-up on them. Like, this is my reasoning when I'm deciding whether to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on
and years.
Yes. And so that was my everybody, was a friend's mother and people from my hometown. And of course, I'm an only child. So my parents, they always say, we love you unconditionally. And they never put restrictions on it, but I always wanted to impress them. And I always felt, because I came from Tyler, not Dallas or some other nearby big city, I felt very uneducated. And so I thought, if I have a law degree, then that will tell everybody that knows where I'm from that I'm smart enough. Yeah, so that was the voice that was driving me. And it never changed. Even when I was in my 30s and I knew, my ex-husband and I were doing some really cool things, those were the people that were still in the back of my head. And I thought, finally, I'm doing things that will impress or not disappoint. Yeah.
It's amazing when we look back.
Yeah. And the reason, if I might add, the reason that I really began to distinguish those voices is because, for example, when I got to spend a month abroad my senior year of college, I was a French major. And so I lived in Paris for a month during the summer. I didn't care about any social standing. I didn't care about education. I didn't care about any of the things that I previously cared about when I was over there. And I realized it was because I was kind of a clean slate. I didn't have any of those people around me. That started to tip me off that something was awry. And then, of course, fast forward many years, but Burning Man, another one where I found that I just loved being around people without having to know who they were, what they did, and, where they stood in the community. And so when I started paying attention to that, and I thought, oh my, I don't need these things to make me feel good about myself. People like me and will get along and have fun without all of the trappings that I had held on to so tightly for so many years. So it's been really fun to get to now. I came to Seattle, I would say, as a clean slate. I knew no one except my partner. And it's been really fun to feel like I'm more of an observer now than feeling like I was always sucked into other communities where I had to perform, I had to be somebody specific. So it's been wonderful to be on this spiritual journey in a community where I can just kind of be the watcher and work on my own spiritual progress rather than gauging my external stuff by the folks that are around me in my new community, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Can you describe for us the difference between that feeling, and you didn't use the word, this is my word, but that feeling of freedom when you listen to the voice in your gut and what it felt like when you didn't? So can you sort of contrast or compare that?
Yes, that's absolutely how I would describe it, Vivi. I think that's perfect. Freedom is exactly it. And it's funny you choose that word because there were so many times when I was, trying to extricate myself from my old life. And it was really hard. I had deep roots in Austin with my ex-husband and, of course, my marriage itself. And, of course, my career as an attorney and even just my involvement in other stuff once I left law and was just focusing more on supporting my husband and our life there. So there was a quote, and it's, of course, one that Martha included in one of her books. It might have been Steering by Starlight. But it was that the Buddha said that when you find a body of water, you will know it's the ocean because it tastes of salt. In the same way, you will know enlightenment because it tastes of freedom, not safety, not comfort, but freedom. And for me, I was able to use some of the tools that Martha had in her book for that shackles on versus shackles off. Mm-hmm. And as comfortable and as safe and as damn near spectacular as my life was on the outside, it felt shackles on, every part of it. So I would check in with the body and I would feel that clamp down in my chest, the clamp down in my throat, the constriction, anytime I would envision staying in my life. And then I would get this expansive, open chest feeling when I would envision whatever the future was, even though I didn't know what it would look like. I just knew it would be free. And for that reason, it was mainly that quote I kept repeating over and over and then checking in with my body to see what felt more expansive and free physically than clamped down.
That's a beautiful practice, and I'm so glad that you read that, because this is not, I don't want to say easy, but it does take so much courage. It does take so much heart to continue to move in your own path, especially when it goes against the current of society.
Absolutely, yeah, because I feel maybe everyone to their own degree, but I felt more swayed or more pulled into culture than most. I mean, really, I'm not exaggerating. I know I said it earlier, but my entire self-worth was wrapped up in these other things. I'd spent my entire life trying to feel better about myself using externals and crutches like an armor. So it felt absolutely naked when I walked away. And I didn't, for as successful as my ex-husband was, I didn't walk away with what people thought that I would just because of the setup I had with him. So I had no guarantees. There were points when I didn't know that I would leave with anything at all. Mm-hmm. And that was terrifying because I knew I didn't want to practice law. So what the hell am I going to do to support myself? I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, it's funny, the way things were, I got enough to give me a sabbatical to figure things out, but not enough where I would be so comfortable that I wouldn't be hungry to go after my calling, because I have an inordinate amount of fear about putting myself out there in certain ways. Unless I am really hungry, I'm not going to do it.
That's delightful. I wanted to squeal. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I think some people can be motivated by a love of their calling or a movement towards something. And I have to say, I'm one of those people that it's kind of like I'm being pushed out of the nest. I would have stayed in the nest for a really, really long time, maybe forever, if I didn't get pushed. And so the universal setup with what I had, financially was just the right amount to get me out of the nest.
Well, that is beautiful. And when you think of young animals who are being, mother birds push their babies out of the nest so that they learn to fly, and otters pull their babies into the water. So we're drawn into what doesn't feel as comfortable and doesn't feel as safe because it's meant for a greater good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know I've said it multiple times and I say it a lot, but I'll say it again. Once you start taking those steps, the universe will meet you halfway or even more. It's been my experience. It's been the experience of the mentors that I follow, like Martha Beck, Lissa Rankin, Tosha Silver, and so many more. It's the universe will meet you there when you show up.
And that's such a beautiful point, Sunny, because when I work with individuals on dreaming, we can't dream big enough. We absolutely can't. So any dream that you have, your possibilities are 1,000 times bigger than that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's and I think I've even heard Martha say this, but if you can envision it, there's a theory, since when we're not in physical reality, time is not linear, that if you're envisioning it, it's already happening somewhere already out there. And you're just moving toward it as you do your turtle steps or however you work with your clients to get there. But sometimes when you're in the place of between the big dream and putting it into physical reality, I'll just say from my experience, it does take longer than I thought that it would. But it's a bit of a meandering journey, but it's not unpleasant once you kind of lean into it and realize you are so supported.
Yeah. So for anyone who's being zigged or zagged or your GPS is rerouting your path to your destination, that's not a step back. If we think of the Texas 2-step, since you're a Texas girl, you get around the dance floor even though you're taking steps backwards.
Oh, that's a really nice analogy. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's funny you say that because just when I was reading Lissa's book yesterday, The Anatomy of a Calling, she said that very same thing, that your calling may lead you into some dead ends and some cul-de-sacs. Do not be alarmed. That is part of the process. And probably when you look back and you connect the dots, you'll realize what each of those little, maybe as you interpret them, stalls or failures, you'll realize they weren't those things at all. They were all part of the learning to get you where you ultimately need to be.
Yes. Now, Sunny, we're getting to the end of our time. I would like for you to tell us where we can find more of you. I personally listened to your show, and you are a delight. You are literally Sunny in Seattle.
Thanks, Vivi. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So Sunny in Seattle is my weekly radio program, and I interview a different guest each week. And it's anyone from authors, teachers, coaches, healers. And my goal is to inspire and encourage and give you tools to live a life of peace, joy, freedom, and purpose. And it airs live on Friday mornings on Alternative Talk, 1150 AM KKNW. And it's on, from 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific on Fridays. They do have an app for your smartphone, which is how my parents listen in Texas. I'd say that's the best way to do it. They also have a website. You can go to 1150kknw.com to learn more. And my personal website for my coaching and all that good stuff is goldenoversoul.com. And I'm here in Seattle. I have a little office in the U District. And that's about it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. You are definitely walking the talk and a role model for those in the place between.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Vivi. Your questions are amazing, and it was such a delight to talk with you and to reminisce on some of these things. I haven't done that in a while, so I appreciated the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for joining us today here on Turning Inward with Dr. Vivian. If the show moved the needle for you, please leave an honest review in iTunes. And also make sure you cruise on over to VivianCarrasco.com and join us for personal strategies and tips to help you move forward. Ciao, baby.